Well, you hear the phone going off here and so forth. All right. Boy, that looks awful dark. I have no idea why that is so dark. Um, um, unless there's something wrong with the camera. How about that? All right, let me try it one more time to see if I can fix the lens of the camera here. All right, much better. All right, much better. My apologies. My apologies. Okay. Um, maybe you can, a couple of you sent me notes and talked to me, but I would love to hear from more of you about, give me some direction. Our numbers have fallen off since we went to, since the COVID thing is broken some. So my direct email is pds@projectpray.org. And I'll put that up and I will show that. Let me show that. There it is. Okay. That's my direct email. And you can send me a note and say, yeah, I like this. I'm willing to share this with others. This is important. Should you back off and do 1 day a week or 2 days a week? It's becoming taxing because of the schedule. So anyway, just talk to me. Let me know. And also, is there a particular? Do you like the random, or would you prefer that this was fixed in some way so that we were exploring some ongoing study? I can tell you that where I'm at in my heart is just this continuing to harp on Great Awakening, and um, so that's probably where we'll end up anyway. Bill Woods, God bless you. Kathy from South Carolina. Bob from Ohio. I think Gerald, God bless you. Nancy, God bless you. Christy, God bless you. Shirley, I heard from you. Tina, I heard from you. Vicky, I heard from you. Bill, God bless all of you. Allison, God bless you. So in Kansas, we put out a little booklet. Phyllis, God bless you, called, it looks like this, The Plains of Kansas. And it has a outline of America. You can see Texas and Florida here, awaiting the next great awakening. And these are available. I don't know if they're on our, I hope they're on our bookstore site, which is Alive Publications. But in it, there's a chapter called A Time for Choosing. In 1964, a guy by the name of Ronald Reagan, you may have heard of him. He, of course, was an actor. He was president of the Actors Guild. All kind of movies he starred in, and host of Death Valley Days in my growing up years, The Last Millennial, and so forth. But he began to do speeches across the nation called A Time for Choosing. He spoke at clubs, he spoke at events, he spoke at breakfasts, he spoke at dinners. And some people looked at it as just another gig for him, but he was serious. He said that on reflection, he had become concerned about the nation. And so I adapted his speech and included it in this book, Awaiting the Next Awakening. If a Hollywood actor on times of deep reflection about where the nation is could reach the conclusion that we are going in a profoundly wrong and flawed direction, and if he could begin to speak out about that across the nation, then maybe there's hope for all of us that on reflection, we too might come to the conclusion that, boy, we've got to make a choice here. Remember, this is the 60s. This is the 60s. On October 17th, 1964, that speech that Ronald Reagan was giving in small venues was given publicly on national television. It was riveting for some. And 2 years later, he became the governor of California. And the rest is, as they say, history. 1960s, we were at a crossroads. Now we're 60 years removed from that. The 1950s, prosperity, family car, home ownership, the birth of our national interstate system, which was like opening of the railways. You could go anywhere in the nation, and you could do it in your own car at your own convenience. Hotels and chains and restaurants began to pop up everywhere. Televisions multiplied with a parade of family sitcoms and comedies and variety shows, and this Disneyland opened, and this was the back to the church era, with more than 50% of the population in church on any given Sunday. And then the next decade, the 60s, we entered into a dark chapter in the nation. The Vietnam era, the youth revolution, urban poverty, the birth of the gang culture in the large cities of the nation. And now that is proliferated everywhere, even in small country towns. A dissident musical genre, rock festivals, addictions, drug experimentation, the generation gap, as it came to be called, the war against public prayer, and the battle over which philosophy as a nation we would teach our children. Would we teach Christianity or secularism? Would we be a culture that honored God and Christ, or would we be a culture that sought freedom from religion, not freedom of religion? Specifically, freedom from Christianity. Would we believe that God created the earth, and by extension, that we were created in his image? And this is, of course, what the founders believed. Or would we abandon our belief in God's creation and embrace Darwin's evolutionary ideas? Which would we choose? Theism or atheism, veiled as humanism, by the way. This was a time of high ideological traffic. It was a treacherous crossing for the nation. It was a seedbed for disaster. It was the climate for a perfect storm, and we did not navigate our choices very well. We are now reaping a whirlwind as a result of what happened in the 60s and subsequently in the 70s. Let me go back to a biblical narrative. Joshua led the children of Israel into the land, and he parked them at Shechem. It's very interesting, because when Abraham came into the land, God led him first to Shechem, and he built an altar there. God told him, follow me. And God led Abraham. He followed God, hearing the voice of God. And at Shechem, between Shechem and Bethel, somewhere God not only spoke to Abraham, but God appeared to Abraham. He built an altar at Shechem. He built an altar at Bethel. And God brought Abraham to what became known as the teaching tree of Moreh. Shechem is a low ridge, a shoulder that connects Ebal, the Mount of Curse, and Gerizim, the Mount of Blessing. And so God is teaching Abraham. and he's revealing himself to Abraham. And then 400 years later, well, 440 years later, Israel would come into this land and Joshua would bring them back to the same place. How interesting. And he then, near the teaching tree of Moreh, would teach Israel. They would read the law from the Mount of Curse and the Mount of Blessing. And they would enter into a covenant with God. And by the way, you see in Genesis 15, God entering into a covenant with Abraham. In the building of the altar, there's something of a covenant. In the following after God, there is a covenant. In Genesis 12, there's a proposition for a covenant. If you'll follow me, if you'll hear my voice, if you'll go to the land that I show you, I'll bless you and bless your children, and I'll bless those that bless you and curse those that curse you. Here is the framing of a covenant. And then you see Abraham at the teaching tree of Moreh, a covenant. Then you see him breaking bread with Melchizedek, the bread and the wine. This is the foreshadowing of the Passover. This is a foreshadowing of the Last Supper. Melchizedek is a type of, perhaps an incarnate and manifestation of Jesus Christ. And so here is covenant again. And then in Genesis 15, you see him cutting the sacrifices in half. This is blood covenant. He's making a covenant with God. Covenant, berith, means to cut. You make a covenant by cutting. And so God cut a covenant with Abraham, and he cut a covenant with us in the cutting of the flesh of Christ, in the breaking of the skin on his brow, the piercing of his side, the nails in his hands and his feet, the whipping of his back, the cutting of a covenant here is not over an animal. It is over a man, Christ Jesus. This is a blood covenant, and Abraham enters into a blood covenant with God. And to the place of these covenants, God brings his people back, and they read the law of blessing and cursing, and all of the nation is parked here at Shechem, where Abraham entered into the covenant with God. And then at the end of his life, Joshua called the nation back to Shechem again for another national solemn assembly. And that's what we were doing in Kansas. We went to the heart of the nation, to the center of the nation, and we cried out to God, and we rehearsed the covenants of America. And we pleaded with God to act in behalf of his own purposes there in Kansas. So at the end of his life, Joshua was old. He sees the nation drifting from God. He sees them forgetting God. He sees them thinking that they built the nation and experienced the conquest by their own power. They were strong in military. They now forgot the hand of God. They didn't see anymore the invisible hand of God that toppled down the walls of Jericho, that opened up the Jericho, the Jordan River, as they went across. They couldn't see how they were outnumbered and still won the battles. They were rationalizing away the miracles as we've rationalized away the miracles in our entry of the land. In the survival of the first pilgrims in the land. And so Joshua, an old man, assembles the nation. Many of these have now been born after the wilderness. And so they don't know the miracle of daily manna. They don't know the miracle of the Red Sea. They don't know the pillar of fire or the cloud. They know only the seasons of planting and plowing and harvesting. They don't know the stories of divine intervention. And in this solemn assembly, Joshua solemnly confronts the nation, as we attempted to do in Kansas and as we must do now, state by state in all 50 states from April to July in 2022. The Bible says the elders and the leaders and the judges and the officers of Israel and the people presented themselves before God. This is Joshua chapter 24, verse 1. It was as if a whole generation had forgotten God, and that is our dilemma today. Long ago, Joshua said, your fathers, including Terah, he goes back to Abraham's father, the father of Abraham, and Nahor, lived beyond the Euphrates, and they worshiped other gods. But I took Abraham from beyond the Euphrates, and I led him through the land of Canaan, and I multiplied his descendants, and I gave him Isaac. And to Isaac I gave Jacob and Esau, and I gave Esau Mount Seir to possess. And to Jacob I sent his sons down into Egypt, and then I sent Moses, and afterwards I brought you out. He's rehearsing the history, the forgotten history of God's guidance upon the land. I want you to notice something in this passage. I want you to notice the plural word you. You were brought out of Egypt. See, this is corporate identity. It's not the present, it's reaching into the past. In the experience of your fathers, you were led. See, Joshua sees one people stretching across generations, and God sees one people stretching across, one American people stretching across generations. He sees one people, Israel, stretching across the millennia. One people. We don't understand this idea of corporate identity. In the experience of your fathers, you were led. The multiple generations that bridge centuries are one people that God frames a covenant relationship with for transcendent purpose and destiny. I brought your fathers out of Egypt. Your fathers cried out to the Lord, and he put darkness between you and the Egyptians. The sea engulfed them. Your very eyes saw what I did, but their very eyes didn't see what. It was the eyes of their fathers that saw. And this is the point. If we cease to see in our own generation our call to destiny and the action of God in our behalf, and we can't see that through the eyes of our fathers, we'll always choose wrong in a generation. We'll always find ourselves lost in some wilderness, between some place, in some bondage. The war against history is a war against our corporate collective identity, against our transcendent purpose as a people. And so Joshua details the struggles and the battles, and he traces the intervening hand of God in their midst. And this hand of God, the founders called providence. It was the sovereign assertion of God into the affairs of men to position them to fulfill his purposes. The founders saw it, and Joshua saw it as well. And you notice again this multi-generational corporate identity. You crossed the Jordan. The people of Jericho fought against you. The Amorites and the Perizzites, the Canaanites, the Hittites, and the Girgashites, and the Hivites, all those. But I delivered you, not by your sword or bow, but I gave you a land that you did not toil for, and cities that you did not build. Notice again, in the blessing of God upon our fathers, we were blessed. And there is a commitment or endowment or a responsibility to that. Now fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and truth, and cast aside the gods that your fathers served beyond the Euphrates. You know, it's sad. Rachel carried in her tent her own gods until Jacob at Shechem, here it is again, forced his family, including Rachel, his beloved wife, to bury her idols. And then they went to Bethel to reconsecrate the nation, their family to God. And that becomes the founding then, or the basis again of touching Abraham's covenant at Shechem and at Bethel, and this appeal to Joshua. Listen to Joshua's pleading here. If it's unpleasing in your sight to serve the Lord, now how could they so quickly become dissatisfied with God and their faith? This is disheartening. The NIV says, if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourself whom you will serve. This is the Romans 1 of Joshua. God giving his people up. God giving his people over. God letting his people go. All right, if you want to do that'll be emotional depravity. That'll be mental illness. If you want to go down that route, the New Living Translation is even more forceful, noting a threat of rebellion. If you refuse to serve the Lord, see, how could they have reached this place? How could we have reached this place where we see faith in God, the scriptures, the commandments, our faith traditions of our fathers, an evil thing? This is what they begin to see. This is an evil thing to serve God, because they had become enamored by the gods of all the nations around them, among whom they had settled. We have now become enamored of all the nations that have come to settle among us, 521 different people groups. We've become enamored, tolerant of their gods. It's okay. Maybe we can find a hybrid between Islam and Christianity. So there is a Chrislam now. It's a hybrid. I listened to a congressman yesterday in a luncheon, and he talked about how we have to learn to sit down with these socialist Democrats, and we have to figure out a way to fix the nation. You cannot yoke an ox and a donkey together. It's against the law. You can't do it. Their stride is different. It will injure both of them. You can't do it. Two can't walk together unless they're agreed on fundamental principles. And so this is the point of this speech of Reagan. This is a time for choosing. God never wants to coerce a people. He wants unfettered love. In exchange, gratitude, in exchange for his love and grace, for his goodness. He wants our enlightened following down a path of truth, out of trust. He wants harmony with us. He wants unity with us in a spirit of freedom. He doesn't want forced complicity to his law. So the new law is not the law at all. It's not the law of the Old Testament. It's the law of love. We're constrained by love to understand and trust God that the principles that he's given us are the right principles for us, that holiness is the right choice, that righteousness and godliness are good for us. This is good medicine for us. And the absence of that trust is fundamental to our problem. So if it's disagreeable, God can see, choose for yourself. And this is where we are as a nation. You must make your choice. The nation has to make its choice. And accepting the gods of your fathers, which is paganism, the gods of the Amorites, it is not a change in religious decor. From values comes behavior. And from culturally affirmed behaviors emerges a healthy or an enslaved people. We now face a choice. For 70 years, we have lived with the gods of this world in our tents. We have compromised. We've worshiped the God of the Bible, but we've allowed idolatry and a dismissive attitude to God to develop. Sports has become our God. NASCAR has become our God. Hobbies have become our God. Fishing, hunting has become our God. And now we must choose. If this doesn't please you to worship God, choose who you will worship. Worship. What will your values? What will the values be that drive your life? The gods of your ancestors, the gods of the Amorites, Christian Standard Bible. Notice, this is not listen. This is not a personal choice. It's not a personal choice. This is a corporate choice. Joshua said, as for me and my house, we will choose, if the nation goes in this way, we will choose, my family will go in another way. We will be the dissident, set apart family. But this is a corporate choice. America has to make a decision. Will it follow the path of its founders, or will it go in the direction of pluralism? You see, if the decision had been left to us in the 1960s regarding prayer in school, we would have continued to pray. If the decision had been left to us regarding the 10 Commandments on the wall, we would have continued to leave them there. If the decision had been left to us regarding abortion, regarding gay marriage, but the decision has been taken from us. So our rights are being stripped away. The ideology of godliness is being stripped away by a group of people who have usurped the role of kings, and they're dictating a law that is not the law of God, it's not natural law, to us. And we have been complicit in this. We have been far too silent in this. It's time now. It's time now to choose. To choose as a nation. So we went to Kansas to say, okay, God, we don't have political authority. We don't have relational influence over political authority. We use we don't have jurisdictional authority, but we have moral authority and we have spiritual authority. And so we are pleading with you here at the heart of the nation, at the geographic center, to have mercy upon us and send a revival, because only a spiritual awakening can wake up consciousness to the law of God and to the moral restraint of God. So we are here at the heart of the nation. Now we want to see this happen at the heart of every state from April thereabouts to July of next year, praying to God. I think you can get this little book. It's a pretty easy read. It's only 98 pages. And it's kind of why we went to Kansas and what the philosophy is behind that. I know I'm almost over on my time, but I want to tell you, let's see. I did not look at this carefully, but let me see if I can pick this up. It's July the 9th, it's 1755. The American Indian chief looked scornfully at the officers on the field before him. The British soldiers trained for European war wore their red coats and lined up in lines, and the French and Indian hid behind trees. In this specific war that happened earlier, one by one, the chief's marksman shot at a mounted British officer until only one remained. Quick, let your aim be certain, the chief commanded. The warriors leveled their rifles at the last officer on horseback. Round after round were fired at this one man. Twice the officer's horse was shot from under him. Twice he grabbed a horse left idle when a fellow soldier had been shot down. 10, 12, 15 rounds were fired by the sharpshooters, and the officer remained unhurt. The native warriors stared at him in disbelief. The rifles seldom missed their mark. The chief suddenly realized that a mighty power was shielding this man. He suddenly he shouted, "Stop firing. This one is under the special protection of the Great Spirit." A brave standing nearby added, "I have made 17 clear shots at him, and I could not bring him to the ground. This man cannot be killed by a bullet. This man was not born to die in a battle." As the firing slowed, the lieutenant colonel gathered his remaining troops and led a retreat. That evening, as the wounded were being carried off, he noticed the odd tear in his coat. It was a bullet hole. He rolled up his sleeve and looked at his arm directly under the hole. There was no mark. He took off his coat and found 3 more bullet holes where the bullets had passed through his coat but stopped before they reached his body. 9 days after the battle, having heard the rumor of his own death, he wrote his brother to confirm that he was still alive. Since my arrival at this place, a circumstantial account of my death and dying has emerged. I take this opportunity to contradict the first. But by the all-powerful dispensations of providence, I have been protected beyond all human probability. I had 4 bullet holes through my coat. 2 horses shot out from under me. I escaped unhurt. Death was leveling my companions on every side of me. This battle was fought in the French and Indian War, July 9, 1755, near the city of Pittsburgh. That 23-year-old officer went on to become the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army and the first president of the United States, George Washington. 15 years later, in 1770, he returned to that same wooded area in Pennsylvania, and an old Indian chief, hearing that he was in the area, traveled a long way to meet him. He sat down face to face over a council fire, and he told him, I am the chief. I am the ruler over my tribes. My influence extends to the waters of the Great Lake and to the Blue Mountains. I have traveled a long and weary path that I might see the young warrior of the great battle. I was on the day when the white man's blood mixed with the streams of our forest that I first beheld this chief. I called to my young men and I said, Mark, young, tall, and daring warrior. He is not of the redcoat tribe. He hath an Indian's wisdom. Quick, let your aim be certain, and let him die. Our rifles were leveled, but for you, they knew not how to miss. The special guardianship of the Great Spirit was upon you. We immediately ceased to fire at you. I'm old. I'm soon to be gathered up to the great council fire of my fathers. But ere I go, there is something bids me speak in the voice of prophecy. Listen, the Great Spirit protects the man, pointing to Washington, and guides his destinies. He will become the chief of nations, and a people yet unborn will hail him as the founder of a mighty empire. I've come to pay homage to the man who is the particular favorite of heaven, who can never die in battle. That story appeared in American textbooks until about 1934. And when Deweyism emerged and a liberal slant on American education took place, we began to purge all the miracle stories of our founding. And we began to move full-blown to the point where we now apologize for our founding. We've lost our way. We exist only by the miraculous sovereign intervention of God. And somehow we must find a way to embrace and admit our flaws and yet retain a certain amount of humble pride for the nation and the destiny of the nation. If we destroy the platform on which we stand, then we will never achieve the destiny of America being used as the platform to finish the Great Commission. That's what I'm interested in. That's what I'm praying for. Thank you, Wendell, for praying for me. I need your prayers. I'm sorry I didn't get to shake hands with you in Kansas. I saw you in the crowd at least once. God bless you, Rose. God bless you, Levine. God bless you, Bob. Marlene, Laurie, God bless you, Pamela, Phyllis. I think I've gotten to all the rest of you. I'll try my best to be back. And then we'll have to make a decision about what we're going to do with these dailies. I'm continuing to do the Sunday morning, 8 o'clock, this same place in which I'm opening a Bible. Right now, we're in the visions of Zechariah, and we're praying those visions. continue to pray about the next step in this movement. God bless you. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day. God bless you all.